introduce today's speaker, Jessica Davison. Jessica's got many years of experience of supporting communities and individuals. She's based in Northeast Victoria, and most recently announced as a finalist for the Red Cross Blue Spark Award for her leading by example, demonstrating Red Cross's values and constructive behaviours that can contribute towards Red Cross's positive impact towards the community. So welcome, Jessica.
That would have been off to a bad start, wouldn't it? No, I couldn't unmute myself. So look, lovely to be here. Thanks so much, Jai, for a wonderful welcome this morning and introduction. I think we've got a little echo, which we've just got rid of, so that's all good. So look, Red Cross. I am a very proud Red Cross person. We have a wonderful history starting way back in 1859 with Henry Dunant. Henry was a Swiss humanitarian who was walking through northern Italy and stumbled on a battlefield and found wounded soldiers on both sides of the war. And he was shocked by what he saw, so many injuries and distress. And he managed to rally up some support from local people to help both sides of the warring group. So from there, he did some amazing work, including some basic work around getting the Geneva Convention up and going. So his legacy lives with us today, and a lot of our work is still in war zones, as you may well be aware. We've got an effort going on at the moment in the Ukraine and elsewhere. But at home, more locally, we've had a big role in supporting the bushfire disaster recovery effort right across Australia. We're part of a national team supporting people more locally in Victoria, Australia, in the northeast and southeast, and my team sort of extends across both those areas. And we've been lucky enough to draw on that legacy of Red Cross's experience through disasters, both here and in the international context. So what we'll cover today is what we've learned through that long journey about stress, stress that you might be feeling yourself, and stress that you might be seeing in others. And certainly a lot of our roles, and I suspect yours as well, may well be supporting friends, family, your work colleagues and others in the community as they experience stress in a whole range of different ways. So we're going to break down what we're going to talk about today into three parts. We're going to have a look at what stress actually is, understanding possible reactions to stress, and very importantly, we're going to finish up by giving you some really practical tools to support your well-being and also to support the well-being of others around you. So we'll move into the presentation and we'll work on understanding stress. So stress comes in many different forms, and all of these reactions to stress are normal reactions. So we talk about stress being common and normal, and a reaction to abnormal situations. So we'll start at the top with physical reactions, and these ones are often seen in people when they're feeling dizzy, have heart palpitations, might have nausea, sweating, headaches, aches and pains, and so on. A common one I see around the office is people rubbing their necks, or they've got a headache. So a very physical display of stress. Spiritual, existential stress symptoms can involve things like becoming disillusioned with the world, loss of interest in things that may have once interested you, questioning your values and feeling cynical. You may question your underlying philosophy in life. Sometimes we find in the work that we do, where there's profound stress, people may question their religion, or they may find religion, or they may choose to change their beliefs. Moving around, emotional stress. So again, all quite normal symptoms, which might be things like high excitement, high spirits, which you might think is a bit weird for stress, but we certainly see that in people where they talk rapidly and seem quite agitated. They can also display frustration, anger, depression. They can become suspicious. They can have quite inappropriate emotional reactions in a public context. Now, I used to work for local government, and I used to do quite a bit of work with the public in various public-facing roles. And I would get to know the local community pretty well. And on occasion, you'd find people would have an angry outburst that was quite out of character, or would come in quite depressed. I remember one lady who was very vivacious, and one day she came in wearing a very big hat to conceal that she'd been not having good night's sleep, and big bags under her eyes. So signs of stress. I wish I knew that at the time. And look, sometimes that can be around having to pay rates. People might be short of cash, trying to get your planning permit through. But it can be in all sorts of walks of life. You might be working in a bank. People might be desperate for a bank loan that they don't get, and become incredibly stressed. So the important thing to remember here is it's not your fault. This is a normal reaction to stress. Don't take it personally. It's not something you've caused. You know, you're carrying out your job in the way that you need to, but it's just an expression of stress. And when we go into the second part of the presentation, we'll talk a bit about ways to deal with stress. So number 4, we're going to move around to social symptoms. Might include excessive talking about an event or the need for support. And certainly in our bushfire work, we've seen people who would just talk and talk and talk about what had gone on. And it was really important for them to kind of get it out of the system. But it was clearly that they were still feeling very stressed from the situation that they'd been in. They may feel distrust. There might become misunderstandings in a workplace or in the community. Conflicts can arise. What we often find is that existing difficult situations that may have been there all the time, that people kind of work their way around or work their way through. When stress is heightened, that kind of what we call social glue can break down, and people can become quite frustrated and angry with each other. I used to work in a research centre as part of a university, and one of the things I saw was the organisation went through significant change where a number of people lost their jobs, and a lot of them became quite withdrawn from the office. They would lock themselves away in their individual offices and not come out for morning teas and that sort of thing. So being withdrawn is another example of a social symptom of stress. Now, the cognitive and mental stress symptoms, probably all know this one, losing your keys and then finding that they were there in your pocket all along. You know, you were desperate to get out the door. You were going to miss something if you didn't, you know, a doctor's appointment or something if you didn't get there on time. You were stressed, and one of the things to go is your cognitive abilities. So poor memory, lack of organisational skills, impacted decision-making and so on. Behavioural symptoms. So these are things like apathy, restlessness, black humour, particularly if it's unusual in people. Sleep disturbance is a really big one. Intake of alcohol, coffee, tea, other substances, tobacco and so on. Certainly something we see in areas impacted by disasters can be a really big increase in alcohol. So people might drink you know, normal levels or slightly higher, but certainly after a disaster, that's one certain indicator that people are suffering from stress. So that pretty much wraps up our reactions to stress. And we'll have a look at the next slide, which is quite a funny one, of a poor little zebra who's losing his stripes there. He's unwinding and he's thinking it's stress. So yeah, it can even happen in the animal world too. And then just thinking a bit about what's causing stress. So Stress is a natural thing. It's actually a good thing. We need it. We need to draw on energy in emergency situations, and we need it to keep us going. So we've all got these adrenaline and cortisol hormones in our bodies. It's normal and natural and essential. The issue is when it's over a long, long time, when you're in a heightened state of stress and you're suffering from adrenaline all the time. You've got high levels of adrenaline, and same with cortisol. So we'll have a little bit of a deeper look at adrenaline, probably one you're all familiar with. So this one I want to talk to you about was Mick Fanning. So you may remember that Mick was at a surfing competition, and here he is. He's got a rather unexpected visitor who wants to have a bit of a chomp, and apparently Mick's immediate reaction was fight. So adrenaline leads to three reactions in us, three stress reactions. One is freeze, which fortunately Mick didn't do. One is fight, and the other is flee. So once Mick realised this was rather a large animal with sharp teeth, his next very quick response was flee. And when Mick got out of the beach, because this was a surfing competition, there were a lot of media on the beach, and we're trying to interview Mick, and the kind of usual questions: how do you feel, Mick? Tell us about what happened. And Mick was so full of adrenaline that he couldn't speak and make sense. His words came out in a jarbled way, and his eyes were darting all over the place. He was still desperate to get away from that shark. So as I said earlier, it's really important. I'm sure you've all had instances of adrenaline where it's really helped you get out of a stressful situation or got you to a job interview on time. There's a whole lot of reasons why it's a good thing. So we'll just summarise some of those. So it's our flight or fight. We're going to add one there, which is freeze. Liberates your energy reserves. It's incredibly physical and energetic. It lets us take action very quickly. And I'm sure if you stood in front of Mick as he was running up the beach, he would just probably bowl over the top of you. He'd be so determined to get out of the water. So it makes us very impatient. People can have show signs of being intolerant and have outbursts. The other thing it does, excuse me, is that it can give you a narrow focus. So when you look at Mick being interviewed, his focus is very much on getting away from that shark. He's not relaxed and looking around him in a relaxed way. It's important to understand these sorts of things when you might be interacting with people who are very stressed, that their focus of vision is going to narrow. They're going to become impatient and have, they may have aggressive outbursts and so on. This is very normal. We all suffer or benefit from adrenaline, depending on how you look at it. It is short term, and it's unsustainable because we simply run out of energy from the body. The other important thing to know is that your brain actually shifts from the image side of from the language side of the brain to the image side. So as I mentioned, when Mick was being interviewed, he found it hard to speak in coherent sentences. His eyes were the key thing that were helping him get away from that shark. He didn't need to be able to speak. He just needed to look for an escape route. So again, when interacting with people who are incredibly stressed from adrenaline, better to use images or simple language. So we'll now have a look at cortisol, which is a stress hormone which just keeps you going and going and going. So this poor woman has, looks like she's had a very long, hard, difficult day at the office. She's come home absolutely exhausted, and here are her lovely kids, so excited to see her. And now she's got to probably help them with homework, get the dinner cooked and all those sorts of things. So cortisol has a similar effect on the body in that it helps us endure adversity. It helps us keep going. So it's a hormone also that draws on a lot of energy from the body, not as much as adrenaline, but if you're needing adrenaline for a long time, it's very wearing on the rest of your body. So it's drawing important energy away from all your other important body organs, your heart, your liver, your lungs, and so on. And it's just what keeps you going and going. Like adrenaline, it also narrows your thinking ability, narrows your problem solving. You tend to be very focused on one particular thing. We talked a bit before about social lubricant, the social glue that keeps us all friendly and getting along together. We often think back in the days when we were all in the office and you'd have a chat around the in the staff room. You notice people who are really stressed because they can become quite abrasive. That can be a sign of cortisol. Life just becomes about coping rather than living life. I want to just give a quick example here of farmers that we work with in some of our bushfire impacted areas where they're repairing vast properties and kilometres of destroyed fence lines. Cortisol keeps them going and going with the repairs. They find it very hard to think about anything else. Thinking strategically requires more brain energy, quite simply, and it's not possible if you're just trying to sort out your property. And as years go on, sometimes when they have finished their fencing, they'll say, gee, I wish I took the opportunity to restructure my farm, but at the time I just really couldn't get my head around the big picture thinking side of things. So we'll have a look here at some impacts of stress on different things that we do. So stressed mind, we've talked about reduced memory. People can just become resigned and accepting. People can become preoccupied with written words, but they can't understand them. So we find sometimes in working with people impacted by disasters that we give them lots of information about, there's this great service that you could tap into that could help with this, that, or the other. Or why don't you read this wonderful 20-page document on all the great things you can do to help you with stress? And their eyes just glaze over. It's too much to take in. They're feeling too stressed. They don't have the energy to deal with that. Let's have a look at stress thinking. So again, it can be really hard to think strategically. You get quite caught up in details. You can't step back and look at the bigger picture of things. It becomes very hard to plan and prioritise things to do. You just kind of, with the fencing, you know how to do the fencing. You've done it since you're a kid. Family members taught you how to do it. You didn't have to think long and hard about it. So you just keep doing that. That's the easy thing to do. A stressed mind. So again, people, you can have conversations with people, but sometimes they're just not hearing what you're saying. Sometimes we find we say things and explain things, even simply over and over again in a gentle way, but people just can't take in any more information. So being persistent but unresponsive is another issue. So one thing we do find is that eventually people will say, oh, I'm so glad you gave me that information that you've been giving me before, and I wasn't ready to take it on then. I'm sorry. Or they might say, why didn't you give me that, months ago when you did? So another sign of stress, a stressed mind. The last one here, so stressed emotions. One of the things that we notice in very stressed people is that they can have a mask-like face. So just very unemotional. They can have very low energy. You can see it as a very physical thing on people's faces. So I just thought this list might be helpful for you to recognise in yourself, but also with other people that you're working with. Now, sometimes you might find that you don't even know how stressed you are. And the reason for this is because stress can just be normal for you. You've been stressed for so long that you don't see it as an unusual thing, and that you shouldn't be feeling as stressed as you are. Stress also reduces self-awareness and opportunities for self-reflection. So we're going to give you some tools to reflect, for you to understand and figure out how stressed you are. But it will also help you see people around you who are in that constant high state of stress as well. Now, look, I find this diagram really helpful. I came across it in Red Cross, in my work at Red Cross, but it's also something that's really helpful in my general life, day-to-day life with people I interact with, in terms of what trajectory they've taken since a disaster. So if we think about the y-axis on the left-hand side, which is called disruption in normal functioning. So in other words, when you go up and down that chart is the level of disruption, and then the number of years across. So I'm going to talk quickly about 3, and then I'm going to stop and talk a little bit more about the delayed reaction, because that's, I suspect, one of interest to everyone listening today. So the growth one at the top is really interesting. So the that line on the left, the vertical line, is where a disaster or an emergency event has occurred in someone's life. Now, we obviously don't know what's happened before that point, but we're just assuming everybody's roughly at the same starting point. Now, that growth one is really interesting. It's where, for whatever reason, the disaster has actually led to a reasonably positive impact on that person's life. Now, this might sound strange, but we've found in some bushfire impacted areas and other disaster areas, some people have risen up as community leaders, often completely unexpected people, but they found their stride and they found their calling. I don't know what else you might call it, but their gift to help others around them. And they've grown a lot into a leadership role. But it could be something else, like maybe a domestic violence situation where the house may have been destroyed, and the partner or remains the family may be able to escape into a new living situation and break free of that current situation. So there can be some examples of growth. Now, resistant is where you might find a situation where people have gotten to know what disasters might occur around them and have managed to find ways of becoming resistant to it. I often think of my parents who live in North Queensland in Australia. They get impacted on a reasonably regular basis by cyclones. They have a very well-designed house, a modern house, and they have learnt what to do in eventuality of a cyclone. So I'm the one who's in a bit of a panic. I ring them up, do you know there's a cyclone, and are you prepared? And oh yes, of course, we put masking tape across the windows and we've made ourselves a bunker, and we're perfectly happy. We've got a lovely comfortable bed under the bunker. We've got our favourite books and a lamp, and we're fine. And touch wood, they have been through cyclones, and they have been fine so far. So people can develop become resistant to certain disasters and so on, and life situations. They may have learned from others and their own experience. Sometimes we think of elderly people and get concerned about their resilience, but they have an awful lot of experience to draw on. Obviously, there might be some issues around them becoming frailer as they're older, but certainly what I find with my parents. Now I'm going to jump over the next one and get into resilient, which is generally the course that most people will follow. Roughly 80% of the population will follow this course. Sometimes they feel at the beginning a bit of euphoria that you know, we've survived, we've got through. But, you know, as the cleanup starts, which we're seeing with the floods in northern Victoria and around the rest of the country, the fires and so on, people have to perhaps rebuild, get planning approvals, building approvals, insurance sorted out, kids into new schools if they've had to move, you name it. There's one thing after another that needs to be put back in place. But the good news is most people recover and make a good recovery and come up that slope and return to what we often call a new normal. So life's not exactly the same, but it's certainly, the disaster is not something they think about every day. Now, the chronic line here is one that we certainly watch out for in Red Cross, as do our mental health specialists around us. It's where people don't seem to be making that good recovery. So they may have some mental health issues beforehand, but they find it really hard, you know, that the disaster really knocks them around. This only occurs in a small percentage of the population, like 2, 3, maybe 4% of the population. Before a disaster will have a chronic stress response, but after a disaster that might go up to 3, 4, 5%. So it is a small percentage of the population, but certainly look for yourselves and for people around you, people that you work with, friends, colleagues. If you're seeing people just as the months go by aren't getting better, making an improvement, if there's a conversation you can have about suggesting that there are people that available to talk to and refer them on to professional help, that's a really wonderful thing to be able to do. Now, I want to talk about the delayed response, because this often applies to people who are supporting others in the community. So we sometimes see, in fact, I've seen this quite a lot now that my eyes have been open to this, that people helping others are so busy helping others that they're not looking after themselves. So we know of a situation where mother of a family, they lost their house in the bushfires, and this was not the recent ones in Australia, the 2019-20. This was back more in 2009. She worked with her family, and together they rebuilt elsewhere. A few years later, the husband was lucky enough to get another job in another city. They all relocated, kids all went to new schools. Gradually over time, the family was in a much happier place. When everyone else was happy, the woman started to feel really awful. And everything that she'd been through during the disaster and since, all that stress mounted up and she crashed. So I really want to draw your attention to that, because this one is very easy to fall into. You can make yourself busy supporting lots of people around you and not look after yourself as well as you should be, and have a delayed response, which might be months after a disaster, or it could be years in the case of this woman I was telling you about. So please watch out for that one. I also want to talk to you about vicarious trauma. So we also know this is compassion fatigue. Now, the human brain's a funny thing. Even though you may not be directly affected yourself by stress or a disaster or something going on in the community, if you're working closely with people who are impacted, you can pick up on their stress. And not only that, you can feel it as intensely as they do. So it often happens, as we've said in the quotes here, so it's a process of change that happens because you care about other people who've been hurt and you feel committed or responsible to help them. So it's a normal and natural human thing to want to help others. But as we're going to say, over time, this process can lead to changes in your psychological, physical, and spiritual well-being. And if you have a look there, all of those points against the body, pretty much all of them, in fact, I probably would say all of them would be the same sorts of impacts that you might have if you yourself were suffering that same degree of stress. And I want to raise really strongly, make a very strong point here, that stress is quite dangerous over a long time. Yes, it's helpful, but profound stress, whether it's rushes of adrenaline, you're in a highly stressful situation, if that's ongoing, cortisol at high levels over months or years has a very profound negative impact on your body. And we certainly see this years after disasters in the community. So problems with your heart, your circulation, all of your bodily organs are being depleted in energy. Any illnesses you may have had previously can certainly be heightened with prolonged stress. So I can't stress more strongly to please look after yourself and don't become subjected to long-term stress as much as possible. Okay, so now we get on to the fun bit, which is well-being. During COVID, it was pretty funny that we all had so many dogs in our lives. I hope that the dogs enjoyed it too. I know there was a cartoon going around with a dog that had climbed onto the top of a mantelpiece, and the caption was, "Please, no more walks." So there can be a limit, I think, to the poor dogs coping with humans being around as much as they were when we were having to put up with COVID restrictions. But I'm a dog person. You may be a cat person or a person who likes nature and so on. But those lovely animal friends of ours and the natural environment is such a great thing for us to look after our well-being. So we're going to talk about physical, mental, social well-being. This quote here from the World Health Organization is a really handy one. So we want to try and hit that sweet spot as much as we can in the middle there. The World Health Organization says that well-being is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being. It's not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. So hit that sweet spot as much as you possibly can. That's where we want to be. So very simply, why is your well-being important? It's important because you're important. It's because we need to all keep our glasses as full as we possibly can, because in the times where we need to help others out, if we're feeling depleted, run down and empty, we really can't help other people. You don't always know what's around the corner in life, and just keeping your glass topped up at all times is so important. There might be a stressful time coming up for you that you don't know about. Looking after yourself to start with is just so important. It puts you on the front foot. Now, I like to tell this story. So this is a diagram that was handed down to us by Kate Brady, and she's Dr. Kate Brady now. She's with Melbourne University. She's also an advisor to Red Cross, and she worked for Red Cross after the 2009 bushfires in Victoria. And Kate tells a story about how one of her very early bosses said something that was a bit odd. So he said to her, look, Kate, we're very pleased to have you on board. You've got fantastic qualifications, and I can see you're a really good fit for the job. You've got some good experiences behind you already. But I'm going to say to you that if you don't look after yourself, if you don't have regular holidays, if you don't take walks, keep physically fit, eat well, have a really good, healthy lifestyle, have that work-life balance, I'm afraid I'm just not going to invest in you. I'm not going to give you opportunities to act up in higher roles. I'm not going to send you on conferences. I'm not going to give you long-term interesting projects. And the reason for that is because if you find yourself working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you're going to crash. I've seen it so many times in these kinds of jobs. People come in full of ideas, full of enthusiasm, and just dedicate themselves 100% to their work and only their work. So I want you to think really carefully about how you manage your time and how you look after yourself. Because if you look after yourself really well, I know that you're going to last the distance. You're not just going to burn out after 12 months or less. You're going to be able to stick this job for the long term. And look, this is a tough job. I know you're going to really enjoy it, but it's a tough place to work. And yeah, I need to be confident that you're going to really look after yourself. And whenever you apply for holidays, if you've got the time owing to you, I'll definitely approve it. I'll give you the time in lieu that you need so you can have appropriate breaks and rest. That's how I'm going to look after you, but I do expect you to look after yourself. Now, on reflection, I just so much wish that I had a boss way back early on in my career. I think of the number of times when I've worked so hard at the expense of other things and other people, other people in my life who've had to put up with me coming home late and working weekends. And you tend to find that you have friends who do the same thing, and it just becomes normal. That, as we were talking about before, the stress becomes normal, the long hours, the culture becomes normal, and so on. It was really good, I found, working in Red Cross, because our manager, when I first started, which was actually right at the time we went into lockdown in Victoria with COVID, the first managers went on to online meetings. These were actually daily meetings just to keep in touch with people. And at the end of the meeting, we would have a conversation about what we were going to do that day to look after ourselves. And she would always set a great example by saying, I've had a really big week this week, and I am going to knock off at 5 o'clock on the dot, and I'm going to take my dog for a walk on the beach. What are you going to do? What kind of nice things are you going to do during the day for lunch or an afternoon break? What is it that you're going to do to look after yourself? So as much as you can with the people around you, your friends, your family, in the workplace, if you're volunteering for an organisation, setting an example yourself can be a great way to encourage others to do the same. So just coming back to the diagram, which Kate's given us. So what she's saying is, don't at one end of the board be a sort of a funny rainbow thing. Don't be a martyr. Don't just keep doing everything and going until you fall over. Equally, don't be a robot who does much the same thing and just takes on more and more and more and more and can never say no. Try and again hit that sweet spot in the middle of being a professional person. Look after yourself, value your holidays, take the time off, take what's owing to you, have a full life and enjoy other things, and time for yourself, friends and family. So a great message from Kate. We're very grateful to Kate for doing that for us. Now, Jai will have emailed you out a wellbeing toolkit. If you haven't received yours yet, it will be emailed out to you, but you should have a copy of this. So if you have that open in front of you, that's great. If you don't, that's absolutely fine. What we're going to do is to work through this and have a look at some great things that we can do to look after ourselves. So I've talked to you before about not being aware of the levels of stress that you may be feeling. And this checklist is a really great place to start. I ran this course for some nurses and mental health workers at a hospital. They were in a bushfire impacted area. Some of them had lost their own houses or their colleagues had. But in one way or another, they were all impacted by these were the 2019-20 bushfires, so major impact in the community. And when we got to having a look at this burnout checklist, I reckon of a group of about 20 or so people, at least 5 ticked every single box. And they were all shocked that they ticked all of the boxes, or that they had ticked a lot of them. So 5 or so ticked all of them, and a lot more ticked most of them. So if you just have a bit of a read through some of these, have a think about whether these might apply to you. You're very welcome to put in the chat any of these that might apply to you, or other things that you've noticed in yourself that you think might indicate stress. Things like lacking drive and energy to do things, particularly where you used to have a lot of enthusiasm to do things in the past. Feeling challenged by change. You know, I was talking before about the research organisation that I was working at, where there was major change underway and people just withdrew and started working behind locked doors. And quite often the response was, well, you know, we're not going to change. This is how we do it. And it's kind of getting back to the robot in the diagram that we looked at just before. So becoming resentful is one I sometimes see. You know, colleagues in places where I've worked in the past, where people are just sick to death of their job. They've tried so hard, they've put so much energy into it, they've worked such long hours, and still the in tray is full and keeps getting fuller and fuller if they don't keep up with the work. Jo, I was going to ask, are there any comments that people have put in the chat there?
Oh, you can't see the chat. So there's just a couple of comments around. No doubt a lot of us can tick many of these boxes. Brad said, I've ticked a lot of boxes in my previous role. Moving on was the best thing that's happened. For me, Jodie has said, for me, it's not so much the number of boxes I check as a realization that I've been checking the boxes for a long time, which is so true. Thelma said a lot pertains to me. Margaret's mentioned something completely different about the slides being forwarded on, which we'll work through that as well at the end.
Yeah.
Feel free, how many of the 11 boxes do apply to you? Feel free to punch in some numbers. I'll be interested to see just how many, how burnt out people actually are.
The other one at the bottom, feeling that you're indispensable to a community or an individual's recovery. We certainly see that in the communities that we work with, that people try so hard to help others, and funnily enough, when they see successes and that things are on the improve, it can drive them to keep going even harder and keep going harder and just not stop. So there does come a point where you really cannot keep going. You're going to become so exhausted and start to show some of these other signs and symptoms of things like lacking enthusiasm and becoming resentful and sick of the whole thing. So it's not the best state to be in. You really do need to have a break. We know of people helping in our relief centres. We heard of one story where one of our volunteers was working in an emergency relief centre quite a long time ago up in Queensland, and she was answering the phone calls coming in to assist people and direct them to grants and so on. And she was working some very long hours and picked up the phone at one stage and snapped at someone, what do you want? And it turned out to be a friend ringing up to find out how she was. And she said she felt so embarrassed that she'd had that response. And it wasn't until that point that she realised just how exhausted she was, and, had a good cry on the phone and realised she'd, gone over her shift time and packed up her bags and handed over to the next person. So you'll be pleased to know we've got very strict rules around shift times now so that people don't work those very long hours. But certainly sometimes it doesn't come to, you don't realise until you're at absolute breaking point with how stressed you are. Are people responding to how many boxes they've interested,
a couple more. Rosie said 8 out of 11. Margaret said having some reduced sense of accomplishment happens. Alison said, I recognise now that I would have ticked about 8 boxes in my last role. Definitely compassion fatigue and vicarious trauma. It's taken some time to wind down from the role, but feeling good now, which is awesome.
Yeah, that's really good. Fantastic. And look, just taking a bit of time to think about this here and now is good, because it's we all just get busy again, don't we? And we forget that, hang on, no, we're stressed and we really need to do something about it. If you're ticking a lot of boxes there, or any boxes, there's always work to be done on reducing stress levels. We might have a look at the next slide here, which is the recovery rocket. So this one is, I find, a really helpful one. It's in your Wellbeing toolkit. It's a recovery, we call it a recovery rocket. It was devised by a guy called Andrew May. Now, apparently he's got a nickname in the sporting world, which I wasn't aware of, which I probably should be, but Andrew May is a very well-known sports coach in Australia. He's coached the Sydney Swans, who many of us will know are a top-performing football club, particularly when they're on the top of the ladder. And he's also coached Olympians and lots of other top-performing athletes. He himself was a pretty high-ranking athlete when he was a younger man as well. Andrew then made a transition and also started working in the corporate world. And he became really interested in working with CEOs and high-level executives who were wanting to perform better and wanting to, well, even sustain what they were doing at that top level. And a lot of them were saying, look, I'm exhausted, I'm living on caffeine and sugary food, but it's just not enough. I can't keep working as hard as my colleagues are working, and they're all working 24/7. We all finish up in the office at 10 or 12 at night, and we're back here first thing in the morning and go. And Andrew instinctively knew that this model of what they were following was just not sustainable. So he thought a bit about, well, what is it that keeps these top athletes performing at such a high level? And he came up with a rocket. So I'll have a look at this in a bit more detail. And what we've got is a series of, it's almost like ladders here. So at the bottom there, you'll see that there's athletes have an off season. So they'll get right away from the game. They'll get that, you know, back in the good old days when you could afford it and it was cheaper and so on, maybe an overseas holiday for 4 to 6 weeks if they were lucky and well paid. But whatever it was, they would get right away from the game. They wouldn't follow it. They would pick up another hobby. They would go off and spend time with their friends and family and not talk about the game and the season and so on. So one long break each year. Then if you work up, 3 mini breaks. So this might be a long weekend. It might be like a 3 or 4 day weekend, but it should be at least 3 of those each year. Again, getting away. You know, it might just be jump in the car and go for a long drive, go on a camping trip, go away fishing, go away and do a course somewhere. Whatever it was getting right away for 3 or 4 times a year. Moving up again, 30 weeks with 100 points. We're going to go into a bit more detail on this in the next slide, but it's basically about doing activities that add up to 100 points and doing those over 30 weeks of the year. The next one, moving up again, is 300 nights of good sleep. Now that is not as easy as it sounds. Good sleep is where you wake up feeling rested and or at least being able to catch up on your sleep during the day, but it's all about feeling really and truly properly rested. Now the top one there is 365 days, so every day of the week, and Jai reminded me that a leap year is 366 days of the year, so you could do an extra one on a leap year, and you need to have 5 to 10 minutes of slow time. So it might be meditating. I find it hard to meditate because I can't sit still, and I actually find it much more relaxing to do a little bit of gardening or sit and drink a cup of tea. My absolute favourite thing is to have a cup of tea in the morning, and after I've let the chickens out. They do have a lot of water in their chicken pen, but for some reason they love to come and drink out of the bird bath, and they all look like they're sipping wine. It's absolutely glorious to watch them. They look like they just kind of take little sips, and they look like they're savouring. So just have 5-10 minutes of absolute slow time. So it shouldn't be reading. It should just be lying in the sun. It should be sitting down in a quiet corner, contemplating something, looking at a beautiful bunch of flowers, or something relaxing. So now, Andrew's thing was that for athletes, if they were performing at a top level, would be doing this kind of thing as a really good complement to their incredibly intense training program and incredibly intense games that they would be playing. This was necessary time for the body to heal and to recharge, and not only the body but the mind as well. And not only that, but social connections, reconnecting with friends and family, all those good things that make up a whole life and a whole person. Andrew's thing was back to the corporate people, back to the CEOs and the top execs, was, look, really, if you're going to be running around all day drinking coffee and going to meetings in a constant state of stress and not having these regular breaks, the regular holiday, the regular mini breaks, those lovely 100-point activities, which we'll get to in a sec. If you're not doing all of those things, then you're really not going to be able to perform at a top level. So now I think for all of us, we need to think about our lives and how are we weaving in all of these good things into our lives to make sure that what we're doing in our work lives and in our community work and our supporting roles and so on, you know, whether it's your role as a dad or at the men's shed or playing sport and supporting other people's community groups, whatever it may be, really important to make sure that you're factoring all of this in. So now what we're going to do now is have a look at these 100 points over the 30 weeks, and we'll work through some of these. And again, I'm really interested in your comments here about what you think, how you think you're going. Do you think you're achieving your 100 points over the 30 weeks? And there's some other things that you do that help. So let's have a look at these. We need to add up to 100 points. So if you're great at meditating and you have a massage, there's your 100 points. So you need to do 30 of those over a year. So you might want to pick and choose. You might want to have 4 games of golf to get 100 points. For lots of fishing, you might go away for a fishing weekend and you do 4 days of fishing, and that's your 100 points. You might want to mix and match some of these. So you take the kids to the park, you might go shopping, you might watch some TV. Now, you might want to come up with your own numbers here, because for me, shopping is one of the most stressful things I can possibly do. But there's actually been some great shows on TV that I've really enjoyed watching over the last couple of years. And for me, they just take me away. I'm terribly embarrassed to admit that I loved Downton Abbey when it came on. It just would sweep me away into a different world. So you might have something that you really enjoy doing that just takes your brain away from work. Golf isn't one for me because I'm just completely hopeless at golf. You know, I love a bush walk and a swim. We went to see Shirley Valentine last week actually down in Mansfield, down in northeast Victoria, which was the most fabulous show. You know, and one of those lovely shows where you reflect on your own life and marvel at it was a woman who was, it was a sole performance. It was one woman for 2.5 hours was solely on stage, and it was just, we just sat there and went, wow, and didn't think about work for a single second. So those sorts of things are just so great, all of them, for taking you away from stress and giving you often a new perspective on life. There's a story, there's 2 things I want to point out here. One story I want to tell you. And before I get to the story, I want to say that when Andrew May was showing this to his elite athletes, a lot of them would say, you've got to be kidding. There's no way I'm going to have a slow walk or a slow cycle. You know, I'm a top athlete and I'm going to give it everything I've got. And if I'm going on a cycle, I'm going to be going, 60K an hour at least. I want to keep the adrenaline pumping through my system. I want to keep my fitness levels up. And Andrew would say, look, hang on a sec. This isn't about sport. This has got nothing to do with you keeping fit. This has got to do with you slowing down and letting your body recharge, letting your mind wander, bringing you some happiness and joy into your lives. We work a lot with a disaster psychologist called Dr. Robert Gordon. And we often say to Rob, look, you've worked a lot with disaster impacted communities. In fact, he's been working with communities since the Ash Wednesday bushfires in 1983. And Rob, what is it that reduces stress levels? And for Rob, simple: pleasure and leisure. All of these activities that you enjoy doing are pleasure and leisure, and nothing brings down your cortisol levels better than pleasure and leisure. So give it a go. Please give it a go. You'll be amazed by how weaving these kind of things into your day-to-day life will help. I told you I wanted to tell you a story. So we were told this story by, again, some Red Cross volunteers who were working in a relief centre overseas, and they had been through a major storm and I think it was probably a hurricane or a cyclone, and a huge impact. So hundreds of buildings impacted, communities, uprooted and so on. And this one woman came in a state of shock. She was dishevelled and cold and bedraggled. And the Red Cross volunteers said, look, let us help you. We've got warm clothes. There's hot showers here. Here's a towel. There's hot meals. Come back and, once you've got your warm clothes on, and we'll take you across to the kitchen where we can get you some food. And the woman said, I'm sorry, I just can't think straight at the moment. I've lost my 2 kids. I just cannot find them anywhere. I've been looking for them everywhere for the last 3 or 4 days. And they said, look, just have a hot shower. We're going to be here for you as soon as you come out, and we'll talk further. Anyway, this lady went off and had a hot shower, and when she came back with her warm clothes on, she said, I'd forgotten. I know where my children are. We made a plan when the cyclone was arriving that they would go to their grandmother's place, which is in a safe place. And I just, because of everything that happened, I'd just forgotten. So a moment or more of looking after yourself. How many times in the middle of the night of a good sleep you come up with a wonderful idea, or you're having a bushwalk and you're admiring the wildflowers? Do you suddenly, there's suddenly something great comes to you, a really good plan or a new idea, and so on. So please, these things are so valuable. They may on surface first glance seem simple and simplistic, but there's actually some really deep psychological and physical stuff happening inside your body when you do these lovely things around pleasure and leisure. Jai, I'm going to have a glass of water. I'm just wondering whether there's some comments that have come in about what people have thought about these different points.
Yeah, we've had some really good responses. So Alison has topped the list so far with 150 points in the last week, which is awesome. As mentioned, she's got back from hiking from 3 days into Grampians on a women's walking group, mostly strangers, but now friends, now good friends, which is also very good in terms of the leisure and pleasure. Lee said she's got 75 points. Yeah, it's really good, and I'm curious to see how many points you've got. Myself personally, I would even include things like having a haircut. For me, is a time out thing. Going there, actually sitting there for half an hour is I think should have some points on the table, but it's not on there. For me, shopping's not so traumatic these days.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. I need to find the shops where you go to. Yeah, that's all great stuff. So well done on the points. That's fantastic news. I also wanted to say that Andrew May came up with this really good quote, and he says, the biggest difference between great performers and okay performers is the ability to manage stress under pressure. How good is that? So I'm going to say it one more time. The biggest difference between great performers and okay performers is the ability to manage stress under pressure. So if we can think clearly and calmly, often what we come up with is a better result. If you're running around in a stressed state, it's so much harder to think clearly. We have a thing we call psychological first aid, where it's kind of a wheel of things that we think about when we're working with people who are stressed during disasters. And the very first thing is to think about helping people to feel safe. So that's taking them away any threats of danger. It's about helping people to feel calm. And the big thing is when you feel calm, when you feel safe, you can feel calm. And when you feel calm, you can think clearly. So they're the first two things that we always try to help people with, to instill calmness, to talk calmly, to be calm, to take people somewhere to a calm place. If you can't be out in nature, to have a look out the window. I'm looking out at some beautiful autumn colours with blue sky behind them today. It's already making me feel good to look out at those beautiful orange and red flowers out the leaves out the window. Once you feel calm, what we also do is help build people's connections to their family and to their friends. Building those connections is known to really help people. It's a big thing Red Cross does. We're doing a lot of work around this in overseas countries such as Ukraine at the moment, where people have become separated during the war, and we're helping to reunite friends and family. It's a really important thing. During the bushfires in 2019-20, we actually had 30,000 calls from people wanting to be reunited with friends and family. We keep a register at all our relief centres, and we were able to reconnect all of those people who rang with the people that they were concerned about. So connections are really important. They help reduce our stress levels. So with our psychological first aid, we're helping people feel safe, calm, connected. We help to build their self-efficacy. So we talk about what is it that helped you last time get through something like this, because if you think about what you did to help yourself, it's very empowering. We also help instill hope in people. So looking forward to the future, something lovely that you're looking forward to in the future instills hope for things coming up. Thanks, Jay.
I just want to raise, there was one person there, English. I think that might be a Cheryl English, is it? 215 points in the last week, which is awesome.
And Red Cross volunteer. So you get setting an excellent example. Really fantastic. So yeah, build up your points as much as you possibly can. So look, we're getting towards the end here, and what we'd love you to do is to reflect on what you've learnt today and what you'd like to start doing for your own well-being. So you're welcome to come off mute if you'd like to. If you could raise your hand, that would be fantastic. Equally, if you'd like to put something in the chat, you can do that. So we might just start with something that resonated with you today.
Sorry, I can't turn your volume a bit.
Yeah, lovely. So Deb's got the importance of self-care. That's great. Yeah, important to look after your own well-being to be effective. Absolutely. Yeah. You know, it can sound selfish to put yourself first, but really you're doing that to help yourself and help other people around you. Idea of points is a really good idea. Yeah, lovely. Yeah, your question here about the 100 points is a good mechanism, but you're curious if it's a daily tally. So it's actually a week. Sorry, I might have said daily, but it's over the week. So each week you need to have the 100 points. So you don't need to play 4 games of golf in one day. Jai, you might need to help me here if you can. They're coming in thick and fast, which is great.
Hang on, let me just open the chat window there, Jess.
Yeah, stress, a reminder that stress is normal and it can be good, but it needs to be managed. Yeah. Look, I found that really interesting myself, that even cortisol. We all have it as a background level, but Rob Gordon again talks about actually being able to see cortisol in people, in that you can see their hair is lanky, their complexion, you know, lacks vitality, can be quite pallid. People can get spots. I know I get spots if I'm really stressed. The demeanour as well of people who are stressed, instead of walking tall and proudly, can be quite bent over and sad looking. Again, really good to recognise this in yourself, but in other people, and particularly where you're seeing other people looking stressed and unhappy. A really good trigger to have a chat with people. Often people just want to be heard. You might not have the answers that they're looking for. It's absolutely fine. I know there's a few friends that I often ring if I'm having a difficult time, and I don't mind if they don't have the answers. Sometimes the problems I've got are tricky, and just to know that somebody's listening to you is just so lovely. So actively listening, commenting on what they're saying. Maybe they've had, or they've had a similar situation which they can share, and what they've done that might have helped. But all of these things come from you seeing that the way people are responding is not normal to them. So normal reactions, but to stressful situations. Oh, look, really good point here. Stress, cortisol linked to putting on weight. There was a thing that went on after the 2009 bushfires in Victoria, which was a question about how much weight do you think you put on after your work in bushfire recovery with Red Cross after you started, and it was 2 years afterwards, and yeah, anywhere between 2 and 5 kilo. Unfortunately, it was definitely the way that most people had gone. So yes, it's another sign of stress. One of the mystery ones is sleep. Sometimes I have a nap because I'm too tired to do anything else. Look, yeah, a power nap, you can feel really quite refreshed. I have to say, I drive an awful lot in my work, and if I'm feeling pretty exhausted, I'll pull over on one of those roadside rest points. Sometimes I just need 10 minutes and I feel a different person when I wake up. So most definitely, if you can grab a nap, perfect. I mean, they call them nana naps, but I think really they apply to anybody at any age. Anything that restores you, sharpens your mind. But of course, trying to work on good night's sleep is so important. I love this one. Thinking back to what worked in the past for you. Absolutely. Sometimes when you're so stressed, you don't even think about, yeah, look, I got through this last time. How did I do that? That's right. I booked myself in for a massage, or just went fishing with a bunch of friends. Really good strategy. Yeah, good. Good reminder after not coping so well last year. Better strategies in this place. Well done. That is fantastic. Yeah, and look, young people, they've had it such a tough few years with COVID restrictions and so on. Yeah, I had one young person in one of the courses we ran who said, "I'm sick of being known as the COVID, one of the COVID cohort, the bunch of young kids who went through school in the last couple of years through COVID, and the sooner that people can lose that term to describe us better, because it's the stuff we went through is awful, but we're trying really hard to get on and move past it. So that's fabulous if you can pass this on to a young person. That's really great. Lovely. Introduce this model into palliative care. That's fantastic. That's lovely to hear. Yeah, the glass full of water, being able to water the plants. Yeah, you kind of think of the glass, you know, I'm a glass half full, half empty person, but a glass completely full is great, is what we're trying to aim for. Yeah, I love this one. Listen to your husband, wife, and partner so they can see what you need. That is so true. And the thing there of stress just becoming normal to you, because that's what you are going through every single day. And yeah, it just becomes normal for you. But maybe your friend or your partner, as you say, may say, oh, hang on a sec, you're looking really stressed. What's happening? And listening to them, because they can see that change in you. Yeah, lovely comments there. Fantastic. Look, we have finished our formal part of our presentation. We can stay on and keep chatting. We'd love to do that with you, but we'd love to give you, I think it's 9 minutes and 10 seconds back in your day. We'd love you to take that time to grab a cup of tea, maybe a coffee, as long as you're not drinking too much coffee. But if you enjoy a cup of coffee and it's a way of enjoying your day, maybe you want to go out and have a wander around outside, listen to the birds singing away. It's a beautiful day where we are, and have a look at those lovely autumn colours. But it's been an absolute pleasure to have you all here today, and thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you again.